Hello, everybody. So today I'm going to teach you a lesson. It's called Conditional Love is Not Love. And this is going to extend to friendships. I'm just not going to include it in the title because it would make it long and kind of redundant. So, what is conditional love? It's essentially loving somebody, right? You support somebody, love them, or are friends with them, but if they had a certain characteristic which they couldn't change, or they have a preference that is insignificant that doesn't really bother you, and you're trashing a relationship or friendship because of it, and you don't really have your friends back after all because it deviates slightly from what you expect. That is conditional love. So, what is it, and what are some examples that I've encountered of conditional love? So, conditional love is something that you need to get rid of. It is toxicity, simply put, and it's not somebody that has your back. And they only have your back if in certain conditions. So, for example, if you are a black man and you're friends with an Asian man or whatever, and that Asian man is friends with you because you're not Hispanic, then that Asian guy is doing conditional love, and you should not accept somebody like that because they would have been unreliable and they wouldn't have ever came in contact or been your friend had you just been Hispanic. So I have some examples of this, and this is going to cover the entire political spectrum, including the libs, because, well, some libs. I'm not going to say the entirety of the libs. So I was in a bipolar disorder mental health, like a bipolar mental health server on Discord, and it was to support people facing the serious illness, which is manic depression or bipolar disorder, right? And it's a very serious illness, and I thought it was a great support group. The problem, however, was that they had a politics channel, and I think that already makes it very divisive. The thing is, though, is that they were all in conformity with one another, which is that they all had liberal beliefs. Me being more like a libertarian yellow, I'm not even with this administration really anymore. Not after some of the shit that they've done. Um, but me being more of like, I would say right wing economically, like some of my views, and like having some different social perspectives, none of which, by the way, are like discriminatory in any sense. Um, they went from we have your back trip and we'll support you in any situation where you have these problems to you're not a very kind and compassionate person, and we don't have your back because you have different political views. So that's an example of conditional love. They're basically they are friending you because they're under the assumption that you are also of the same political beliefs of them. And this wouldn't be something like if you were spouting Nazism in a server and claiming that people of certain ethnicities should die. That's reasonable to. There are some instances where conditional love is a good thing, right? So if somebody like uh, not friends with you anymore, like becomes distant to you because you support Nazis or genocidal regimes, like some of the communist regimes, like support specific instances of it, then that is a valid reason, a valid conditional love reason to cut them off, right? It's technically conditional love, but it's valid. But in this case, I had simple economic differences, and I was willing to call out some of the corruption and atrocities that I thought the Democrat Party had done. And they couldn't accept it. So they no longer had my back. They no longer had my were looking out for my mental health. And when I left the server, guess how many of them friended me or tried to reach out to me? Zero. They didn't care at all. So you see, they were never good, solid friends to begin with, because I had slightly different political beliefs than them, more economic right-wing beliefs, and I was willing to criticize their party. And so they never reached out to me again. But I'm glad I got rid of those toxic people sooner. And I'm glad that they had the politics channel, because I could really figure out who they were inside. And they're not good people because they do things like that. All right, so that's one example, is that the liberals on my server, and I'm not going to saying all liberals here, the liberals on my server were all in conformity with one another, and they they were distancing themselves from me instead of having my back for something that it basically points to them being unreliable friends and somebody that you shouldn't make friends with. So the second example, this is going to be on the other side of the political aisle, right? Because I was talking about liberals and how I was criticizing the Democrats and how I had more economically right-wing views. This would be a gay or trans kid coming out to their parents. So I want to give some examples of this, and I want this to be very clear, right? So let's say that you come out to your parents at 20 and you're gay or trans, and you say, Dad, I'm gay or trans, or Mom, I'm gay or trans. And they say, okay, we disagree, but we still love you for who you are, and you're still our child, and we won't really mention it at all. And you're free to do what you want, but we have some simple religious disagreements. That's reasonable. And they're still continuing to love and provide support for you. And the only reason, and they mildly disagree with your decision because of religious views. That is reasonable and would not present a case of conditional love. However, if your parents say, fuck you, we're throwing you out on the streets until you get better, until you come back and you get better, quote unquote, and we're going to cut off all of your funding, you're not going to be on our health insurance plan anymore, that is a sign of conditional love. It means that your parents are not really there for you in cases where you have different preferences, or you present as their child something else than what they see, and that is a sign of a toxic family that you should never have contact with again. Do you understand the difference between those two examples that I just gave? If it's a simple disagreement, it's fine. That's not conditional love. But if they reject you and throw you on the streets and you are starving because of it, or, well, I mean, there are welfare programs, but you understand, that would be an example of conditional love. The former would not. And I'm going to give one more example for this in real life. I have a scoutmaster, and he doesn't really like buying gay people because he's religious. And it is something that I've been thinking about a lot, because um, he doesn't know that I'm bisexual, right? He doesn't know that. I'm more like pansexual. I'm really attracted to any kind of gender thing, identity. But he doesn't know about that, right? And so I'm wondering, is it conditional love? Because if he says, well, I disagree with that trip, but you're free to do what you want because you're an adult, then that wouldn't be conditional love. But knowing my scoutmaster, he would cut me off completely and say that I'm a source of Satan. You see what I'm saying? And would continue not to be friends with me, which would be conditional love, and it means that my scoutmaster was never reliable to begin with and never had my back to begin with, because real friends don't do something like this. They can disagree with your decision, but if they're hostile towards your decision and they no longer have your back, that's not what a friend is. And I want you guys to understand that. So before you go to your Trump MAGA or before you go to your Trump MAGA family that says that disagrees with you because you're Democrat or whatever. Let's just put it this way. Don't cut somebody off because they disagree with some of your decisions. You should cut them off only if they are hostile towards you and they no longer support you as one of their own, right? That is somebody that you should instantly cut off, a toxicity source in your life that you should instantly cut off with no hesitation. And the only reason why I'm not cutting my Scoutmaster off is because I really don't know how he would react. There is an instance too that I haven't talked about, which is if I ever did come out to my Scoutmaster. By the way, I just want to note that I've never had like any like relationships or anything with the other like boys in the troop, same age boys when I was in. Obviously, because like just because you're attracted to the same gender doesn't mean that in a group that you have to pursue one of them. You see what I'm saying? And it's ridiculous to think that you're not capable of doing so if you're bi or gay. It's ridiculous to think that somebody is not capable of doing that and assuming that, well, they're going after other, teenage boys as a teenage boy themselves because they have a sexual preference towards guys. That's ridiculous. It's an assumption and it's a terrible one to make towards somebody. So I just wanted to side note that. But if there is a third instance where I would kind of say it doesn't count as conditional love, but you should be careful, which is if you come out to your parents, or in this case, my Scoutmaster, and they say, well, we don't support your decision, and we're going to try to help you get better. We're going to help you try to get better, but and not not be gay anymore, not be bi anymore, and we're going to do anything that we can to make that happen. That is a tricky case because it does seem like it's coming out of their heart and they're genuinely concerned, although they shouldn't be, and they are willing to support and stand by you, but they also want to quote unquote cure you of quote unquote this sickness that you have. And in that case, I would try to argue, and try to see whether or not it is required for you to go and to the lengths that they want you to go in order for you to get their support and love. If the answer is no, you won't give our love and support unless you go through this, kind of program or treatment or whatever, then it's not then it's conditional love. But otherwise, if it's like, no, you don't have to go through it, but we are concerned for you, and we know you're an adult and you can make your own decisions, but we think it's the best if you get treatment, then I would say that's more a case of unconditional love because they're still willing to support you even if you don't go with their plan to quote unquote detransition or you know, change back to straight if you're another sexuality. So again, the thing that I don't want you to take away from this video too is that it's a bunch of woke BS, because that's not really what I'm trying to do here. What I'm trying to do here is make people recognize how to recognize these kinds of toxic relationships and friendships. And I gave examples of people on both sides, both liberals and the kind of traditionalists, maybe more socially conservative people that would do this, right? So I don't want to hear, well, this is a bunch of woke BS, because that's not really what I'm aiming at, and it doesn't really have to be anything political. It could be in many. It could be many such cases. It could be that somebody cuts you off because they hear you're mentally ill, right? Which is a purely non-political case, right? I was just giving some examples, and they happen to be stemming from social and political issues, but it can really be anything. And I want you only to recognize this not as some sort of political agenda video, but as a helpful video to understand and recognize these kinds of problems in relationships and friendships. So thank you.